There is over $2 billion of music royalties for artists, performers, and songwriters that's currently unclaimed. What happens if your music is being played right now somewhere in the world and you have no idea? Do you know who is collecting that money and how to get hold of it? Royalties can be a bit of a minefield. You've got publishing royalties, mechanical royalties, performance royalties, digital royalties versus traditional royalties, which are like radio play, etc. And you need to be signed up to different organizations because each organization collect different royalties for different things. But if you don't collect your royalties, then those royalties will sit in the void. So let's look at how you can protect yourself. The first step as an artist is you need to know the different types of royalties. So let's start with mechanical royalties. Now, mechanical royalties are for music which has been streamed or for music that's been sold. So this is your obvious stuff like Spotify and other DSPs. It also includes iTunes, but it also includes physical. So we're talking CDs, we're talking vinyl, even cassettes now that they're making a bit of a resurgence. Then you've got performance royalties, which is where your music gets used for public use. For example, radio play. If your song gets played on the radio, then you are owed some royalties. But also, as well as radio play, also for live performances. If you perform at a concert, there is a good chance that you are owed money from ticket sales of that concert. Now, the amount of money that you are owed does depend on a bunch of different things. For a start, it needs to be your own songs that you have written. Also, it depends on how many people are there, what the ticket price is, etc., and the territory or the region that you are performing in. But technically, if you are performing a gig, you are owed money, even if it's just $10. Then you've got sync license royalties, which is where your music gets used on things like Netflix or TV commercials or video games. And over the last couple of years, digital royalties have really come into their own. Now, this is not stuff like Spotify, because that's collected by your aggregator, but this is stuff like satellite radio, internet radio, podcasts, YouTube, even websites that businesses might use your music. If your music gets used, you deserve to get paid. Now, the confusing part is who collects the royalties, which are different organizations. So let's start with your aggregator. If you have put music on Spotify, then you have used an aggregator because Spotify is not like YouTube. You can't just upload directly to Spotify. Now aggregator might be DistroKid or CD Baby or TuneCore, etc. Now, they are responsible for collecting and distributing any royalties that have been made from DSPs like Spotify, Deezer, Apple, Amazon, Tidal, etc. Now, if you're selling your merch through Spotify, then your aggregator might collect that and distribute it. But a lot of people are distributing their own physical merch, including CDs, vinyl, etc. Now, if you're doing that through your own online store, like Shopify, for example, then they would be responsible for collecting that money and sending it through to you. But mechanicals is pretty simple these days because we're not dealing with stores all around the world selling your CD. But what about things like performance royalties? Now, performance royalties are collected by organizations called a PRO, a performing rights organization. Now, there are different performing rights organizations depending on where you are in the world. So each country has its own performing rights organization. So I'm in Nashville, in the US, and literally on my street, there are two massive buildings. One is owned by ASCAP, one is owned by BMI, and those are two of the biggest performing rights organizations in America. In the UK, where I'm from, you have PRS, you also have GEMA, GEMA, which is in Germany, you have STIM, which is in Sweden, you have AMCOS, which is in Australia. So each territory has its own performing rights organization that you can sign up to. Now, it's pretty simple for you to sign up to a performing rights organization. You pay a membership fee, you register your music. If you don't register your music, then technically they can't collect any royalties from that music. So make sure that when you are signing up, you are also putting in all of your music and any information that they need so that they can go and find those royalties and send them to you. Now, because we're dealing with performance royalties, your PRO is not only collecting royalties from radio, etc., they're also collecting royalties from any gigs that you do. Now, the way to do this is once you've got a concert or a gig, you can go into the back end of your PRO and you can register the gig that you performed, and you can even register each song that you performed at that gig. Now, depending on the size of the audience, depending on the venue, depending on this ticket price, you should be able to get some money for that gig. Like I said, even if it's only $10. But what happens if you're doing a support slot for a really major artist? Well, you're probably going to get maybe 3% of the ticket sales from that tour or from that gig. That could be a lot of money that is being currently left unclaimed because so many artists aren't claiming for their concert tickets. Then you've got sync licensing royalties. Now these can get a little bit more confusing, and normally these are done between yourself and a publisher. So when you sign a publishing deal, your publisher's responsibility is to go and find ways to manipulate the work, i.e. get your music in places, collect the royalties and distribute it to you whilst taking a certain amount of money. But as we all know, most people don't have a publishing deal, but there are other ways if you don't have a publishing deal, because you can sign up to a sync licensing agency. Now, a sync license agency is slightly different in the way that you are registering your songs, a bit like the PRO. People can find your songs, use your songs, and pay to do so, and then you will collect some of those royalties. Now, when it comes to any kind of publishing deal or any deal in general, you are dealing with legals. So therefore, my first bit of advice is never sign anything until you have a lawyer look over it. Because when it comes to a publishing deal, you get good publishing deals, you get bad publishing deals, and it's your job to negotiate a good deal that works for you and for them so that they can manipulate your work, they can get your work into the right places and claim that royalties and send it to you. And lastly, there's the digital world. Now, the digital world is a massive online space, and you don't know where your music is being used currently right this minute. There are so many opportunities for music to get used or to get housed. And if that is happening and you are not claiming it or you are not eligible for your royalties, we need to sort that out. Now, back in the day, I used to have a radio show and I could play pretty much anything I wanted. And at the end of every night, I'd get a sheet and I'd fill in the form. I'd say, this was the artist I played, this was the song I played. And that would then go off because those artists, I wanted to make sure they got paid for getting played on my radio show. Now, your PRO might miss a lot of these digital royalties because they're worldwide. Your music will be played across the world. And this is where specific organizations come in to help not only find out who's playing your music, but to collect the money and send it to you. So two organizations that might help are Sound Exchange and Songtrust. Now, Sound Exchange collects performance royalties on behalf of the master recording owner, effectively who owns the recording of your song. Whereas Songtrust collects money generated by compositions on behalf of songwriters. Now, one of the most important rules in the entire music industry is how the music industry works, which is it's split into two halves. Therefore, it's all about who owns the song and who owns the recording of that song. So what do you need to do next to make sure you're covered for your royalties? Well, if you have uploaded your music to Spotify, then you will have an aggregator and they will be collecting your money on behalf of you from any DSPs where your music is being played around the world. But PROs, performing rights organizations, these are especially important, especially if you are a live performer. Now, the right time to sign up to a PRO, in my opinion, is when you can afford to do so and your music is out into the world. Because one golden rule is you can't backdate for royalties if you haven't signed up in the first place. In other words, if the songs aren't registered with your PRO and then your song goes multi-viral for some reason, you can't then sign it up and backdate for the last couple of years. Now, as for digital, Sound Exchange is free, so you might as well do that anyway. And Songtrust, I believe, is around about $100 as a one-off payment, but both will take a percentage of any money that they make for you. This stuff is so important. There's this unwritten rule that artists need to stay skint and there's no money in music, which isn't true, but you do need to know how to make it, and more importantly, you do need to know how to collect it. And this is step one of you getting what you are owed from your art. So I hope this helps. And if you are looking for more in-depth strategies on how to get your music heard, build your fan base, and monetize, then why not come and join me in DK Music Business Academy, and I will see you inside. Otherwise, take it easy, and I'll see you guys soon.